Sorry for being late. But sometimes, very rarely, but every now and then the bus company decides just not to send a bus. So.
I have an extra one that I accidentally took.
You accidentally took? Ooh. Okay, we're in Ois base. We're talking about the union of Karbonos. Adam ki yakriv mikem korban lavai. Is it still up there? No. Adam ki yakriv mikem korban lavai. A person who sacrifices from amongst you a korban. A person who sacrifices from amongst you means Adam ki yakriv, a person who wants to come close to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Mikem, it's dependent completely and totally upon you. Every single Jew has the ability to come close to the Eibishter. That's the first pshat. Then mikem korban lavaya. From you is a korban to Hashem. And what's that korban? Your nefesh abamis, mina behema, mina bakar, mina tzoyin, are the different types of nefesh abamis. Everybody has different packages, whatever, bundles, whatever they call them, right? Their bundle. Everybody has different things that they have to deal with in their life. And we were about to begin. We just started the idea that when we sacrificed a korban in the base of Mikdash, on the Mizbeach, on the altar in the base of Mikdash, so there was a miracle at the times of Shlomo HaMelech in the first base of Mikdash, and that miracle was that a fire came down from heaven in the shape of a lion and devoured the korban. So we would light the fire from below, and the lion would come down and pounce on the korban from above. So how does that help us understand how to sacrifice our own korban? As we know, HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't do miracles just for fun. Every miracle he does is to teach us some lesson in Avodah, and the lesson we learn in Avodah is as follows. So we're going to start from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines up. Hine. Kameichein. Middle of the line. The beginning of the line is Arya da'achal karbonin. Hine, kameichein hu ba'aveda b'nefesh ha'adam. So too in the aveda of a person.
7 lines from the bottom?
From the bottom. So too in the aveda of a person. Hara yesh eish shelamayla. There's a fire from above. Vahu harishvei eish shebenefesh elokis. And that's the burning fire of the godly soul. The love of the godly soul for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. A passionate love. Uke Maamer, as is explained, Rishafea Rishvei Eish. It's a fiery flame. Shalhevis Ka. Shalhevis is Davka flame. The flame of Yud Kei. And that's describing the neshama. The Isa b'Medrash Rabbah. We're going to read all this before we explain any of it. The Isa b'Medrash Rabbah, and it's brought in Medrash Rabbah. Huva b'Yalkut. It's brought in the Yalkut Shimoni, which Yalkut means collection, a collection of midrashim. Ke'esh shelamayla. The fiery love of the neshama is like fire from above. In other words, metaphysical fire. And what's the difference between physical fire and metaphysical fire? Physical fire, when it comes in contact with physical water, so one of them wins and one of them loses. If the water is thrown straight on the fire, the water wins and the fire loses. And if the water is in a pot, so then the fire wins and the water loses. Right? There won't be any water soon. Right? If the water is separated from the fire by a pot. Okay, so those two things cannot exist in harmony in Olam Hazeh. In the physical world, they don't exist in harmony at all. In spiritual, metaphysical realms, they do. As a matter of fact, Rashi, at the very beginning of Chumash, right? Breishis, so you don't necessarily have to expect everybody to remember learning Breishis because it was a long time ago, and you probably learned it rather quickly, preparing for Simchas Torah. But this year you'll spend a little more time looking at the beginning of Bereshis, and you'll notice that the Eibishter created something in the beginning of creation. What are the two things that are talked about in the first pasuk in the Torah that God created?
First darkness.
Not the first pasuk. First verse in the Bible. Thank you. Right? In the beginning, God created heaven and earth, right? Famous pasuk. Right? Whether or not it's in the beginning or not is an interesting thing, but forget about that. Bereishis bara Elokim es hashamayim v'saaretz. Okay, and what shamayim? What does Rashi say shamayim is? Shamayim is eish and mayim, a place where fire and water exist in harmony. Eish and mayim. That's the word shem. That's one of the sources of the word shamayim, a place where eish and mayim exist together. Because there's a level of eish that is not contradictory to water or contradicted by water, and there's a level of water that is not contradictory or contradicted by eish. They exist in harmony. Down here in Olam Hazeh, which is a world of differentiation and a world of separation, so those two states of reality are in direct conflict with each other. But in spiritual realms, they're in a state of unity, in a state of harmony. So too, the fiery love of the neshama. What's unique about that fiery love? And many of you have probably learned a Maamer called Maim Rabim, where the Rebbe explains this at great length. She'ein ha'esh mechabe l'mayim, that the fire does not douse the water, meaning the fire doesn't make the water disappear. Ve'ein ha'mayim mechabim le'esh, and the water doesn't extinguish the fire. They live in harmony. Oh, so what does that mean? Hainu, shebeteva nefesh elokis, the nature of the nefesh elokis. Hara yesh be'rishvei eish ha'avel elokus, as a burning, fiery love for godliness, for Kadosh Baruch Hu. And what's unique about this eish, this passion? V'bedugma, and it's, dugma is an example, so in this case it's similar to eish shelamayla, fire from above. What's unique about metaphysical fire? She'ein hamayim mechabin, I say, that water doesn't douse it. Okay, we still don't know what that means. Not yet. Right? That the fiery love of the neshama is like metaphysical fire, a fire that's not affected by mayim. What's the mayim that might affect the fire but doesn't? So the Rebbe now explains. V'hamayim, what is this mayim? What is this water that theoretically could douse the flames, but it doesn't douse the love of the nefesh elokis for Kadosh Baruch Hu? Hey, mayim rabim are the many waters, sometimes translated as turbulent waters, which is anything but a literal translation. It means the many waters. And what are those many waters? But ribui hatirdos, with the great bothers and troubles. But tirdas are parnasa, in making a living, ubilbulim shenim, and other confusing and confounding aspects, but tirdes shenes, other bothersome things, hamabalbulim, that confuse and confound, but tarav aveda, meaning life in this world. Life in this world is the maim rabim that might douse the love, because it's confusing and confounding. This world is compared to mayim. What's interesting about mayim? So first of all, mayim douses fire. So it might douse the passion of the nefesh elokis, but it doesn't because of the nature of the passion of the nefesh elokis. Even though it comes down into this world, the nefesh elokis never loses its passionate love for Kadosh Baruch Hu. I might not be conscious of that, which we'll talk about in the next few lines in the Maamer, but it's there. Why is the Olam Hazeh referred to as Maim Rabin? What does Mayim do? So we don't think about this too often because most of the mayim we see is very small quantities of it. And in small quantities, it doesn't really do this. But in large quantities, it does. And most collections of water are rather large quantities of water called lakes and oceans, right? And what do lakes and oceans do? Oceans particularly, since you fly over them all the time. What's the difference between flying over the ocean and flying over dry land? The ecosystem that lives in the ocean is completely and totally concealed by the ocean. Water hides. What does air do? Air doesn't hide, except maybe if you're over some, Mexico City, so the air might hide what's under there. Los Angeles in the 60s, but not now. right? Air generally lets you see what's there. The ecosystem, if you fly over air, so you see the ecosystem below you. You see the mountains, and you see the lakes, and you might even see the cars and the houses and whatever's down there, right? People who like window seats get a good view, right? If there's no clouds, okay. What does water do? Completely conceals the ecosystem that exists under there. What do Chazal tell us? Everything that exists on land exists underwater. They knew that without Jacques Cousteau. How did they know that? Because they know these things. There's a whole ecosystem. The only part of the system that isn't down there is that thing called medaber. Those things called humans. They don't do very well down there. We have a hard time breathing down there. Fish can't quite figure out why we can't get oxygen out of water. We have a hard time figuring out why fish can't breathe when they're laying on your table flopping around with their gills moving. What's wrong with you? There's oxygen everywhere. Why can't you just breathe? But he can't do it. He only knows how to extract oxygen from water, and you and I only know how to extract oxygen from air. So if we're not in air, we're in bad shape, and if they're not in water, they're in bad shape. Okay, but there's a whole ecosystem down there. Mineral life, vegetable life, animal life, completely concealed by the water. So what's this world? The world of concealment. What are the Maim Rabim? That which might drown you and not let you appreciate godliness. That's the Maim Rabim of this world. Shlomo Melech says, Maim Rabim lo yuchlu l'chabes esa'ava. Maim Rabim isn't able to douse the love. So what's the love? That's what the Rebbe is talking about now, the love of the Nefesh Elokis. V'nares le yishtafu, and the rivers won't wash it away. What are the rivers? The stream of consciousness that you have in worldly matters won't wash away the love of the Nefesh Elokis for Kadosh Baruch Hu. Will that love necessarily penetrate and express itself in conscious you? It might not. But is it there? It's there. And this world doesn't affect it. So that's the fiery love of the Nefesh Bahamis that must be somehow accessed in order to bring about the proper elevation of the korban being the Nefesh Elokis. On the altar, there was a fire from above. What's the fire from above? The fire from above in our Veda is our Nefesh Elokis, our godly soul. We talked about this quickly at the end of Shir last time, I believe. Aveda. Aveda means service, right? But another word for it, changing. That thing that we find so hard to do. Changing. So what's changing dependent on? So people might say change, and this is true. The changing is dependent on discipline. I have to discipline myself not to act in a particular way that I find improper. Okay, that's true. That's definitely true. Or I have to discipline myself to do those things that are positive that I might not want to do. It's also true. But that's only half the equation. That's really not the important part of the equation. It's a necessary part of the equation. Without it, nothing goes. But there's a much deeper part of the equation. And what's that? Tapping into your godly soul. Real change is tapping into your godly soul and having your godly soul resonate in your conscious reality, which we'll talk about in a few lines. And that's what the Rebbe is talking about. How do you bring a korban? So yes, there's a fire from below. What's the fire from below? All of the things that you and I do within the context of our conscious reality, the discipline, etc., necessary to bring about change. That's true, I have to do that. But there's a fire from above. Don't ever forget the fire from above. The fire from above is the fact that you have a Nefesh Elokis, you have a godly soul, and that godly soul is naturally connected to God and naturally loves God. And all you have to do is tap into that. And Mamela, what does that do? Consequently, what does that do? That'll bring about a change in your Nefesh Bahamis. Your Nefesh Bahamis will be illuminated by that light. So discipline is necessary. Discipline is what allows my Nefesh Bahamis to be a kli for the Nefesh Elokis, but the ikar is to get my Nefesh Elokis to shine in my conscious life. Because you and I are godly creatures. A philosopher once asked the Tzemach, well, he didn't ask. He wanted to prove to the Tzemach Tzedek something limited about God, right? Like that's what philosophers like to do. Prove their point. Right? Okay. So what was his point? His point was that God can't be omnipotent, can't be all-powerful. Okay. Tzemach Tzedek said, why not? So he actually said something really quite astounding. and I wouldn't know the answer to it. But Baruch Hashem, I don't have to because the Tzemach Tzedek does. Right? What did they say to the Tzemach Tzedek? There's something God can't do, and that's not. I'm sorry for going there, but it's just very important because I know people run into this. I think they run into it. They used to run into it. Maybe they don't anymore. But in the old days, people used to run into something called Anselm's tautology. And this very, very bright man, in fact, they even made him a saint, right? And what did he say? He asked the deepest of the deepest questions. Can God create a rock that he can't pick up? So deep, so deep. It's a stupid question, right? Yes, he can create the rock, and yes, he can pick it up. And if you can't deal with that, you don't know what God is. Because you're putting God in these little boxes that fit your understanding of reality, but God doesn't fit into those little boxes. So yes, he can create that rock, and he can also pick it up. Okay, fine. But he asked a better question. He said, God can't create another God. Ooh, that's a good one, right? Because after all, and the Rambam talks about this in Hilchos Torah, that one of the most fundamental definitions of a Kadosh Baruch Hu is that he's one. There's no other one. So he, so to speak, he said God can't create another God. So you see, he's not all powerful. So I wouldn't know what to answer, but that's okay. So all sorts of questions I wouldn't know how to answer. Mashiach's still coming. What did Tzemach Tzedek say to him? Who remembers what the Tzemach Tzedek said to him? Some of you heard it before. Amlan, you don't remember? You always remember. Okay, this time you're going to remember. Tzemach Tzedek said to him, he did. It's called a Jew. What's a Jew? A Jew is a creation with a little piece of God walking around. Chelik Eloka mimal mamish, a piece of God from above mamish. That's what your neshama is. Your neshama is a little piece of the Eibishter. So it doesn't mean you're God, but so to speak, what did Tzemach Tzedek say? Yeah, he did. He created a creature that is an expression of godliness and is actually walking around, so to speak, even though we can't cut God into pieces, but your Nefesh Elokis is a little piece of God. That's what it is. Okay, now the Nefesh Elokis, as it descends down into your body, so it becomes something that we could talk about as loving God. Okay, but in its essence, what is it? A little Chelik Alukami Mal Mamish. And that level of, we talked about two different levels of Keser. We talked about Ratzon, will, and Tainuk, pleasure. Right? In the context of understanding Masholim, parables or Sovev, in you and I, right? Superconscious aspects of our being. There's a third level of Keter, of the crown. And what's that called? Radla, Reisha de lo Yoda velo Yisyada, the head that knows and isn't known, that isn't known and doesn't know and isn't known. Okay. What's that in you? That's basically the essence of your soul as it's rooted in the essence of God. That's the part of you that relates to that part of the three crowns, three heads of the crown. Okay. I once asked the Mashpia, what is it that this level doesn't know and isn't known? What does that mean? What doesn't it know? So he said an amazing thing. He said it's the part of your neshama that doesn't know whether it's a Kadosh Baruch Hu or a neshama. It's a part of you that's so powerfully connected to the Eibishter that part of you doesn't know whether there's actually a you or it's just the Eibishter. You're just him. That's what it doesn't know. Okay, so every single one of us has that part of us. And what's that? That's called our Nefesh Elokis. And that part of us can't be affected negatively by the reality of this world. Which means every single one of us has the ability to deal with the reality of this world and successfully and bring about a revelation of godliness around us and in us. Basi L'Gani, right? That's our verse. Make for me a mikdash and I'll dwell amongst them. Not a dwell amongst, I'll dwell in them, it says. B'seich kol echad ve'echad. V'shechanti b'sei cham. Doesn't say b'sei choy, in the mikdash. I'll dwell in them. And how is that? What's asul mikdash? We're going to see in the next couple of lines. Rebbe's going to explain. What does that mean? So we know it means iskafi and ishafcha, subduing and transforming the Yetzer Hara. And how do you do that? Well, now the Rebbe is teaching us. How do you elevate the Nefesh HaBahamis? By bringing it as a korban. How do you bring a korban? Well, every korban, every sacrifice had a fire from below, and that's the conscious activity necessary to bring about change in myself. And then there's also the fire from above, and what's that? That's the godly soul. It helps burn the korban, helps elevate the Nefesh HaBahamis and illuminate the Nefesh HaBahamis. So the Nefesh HaBahamis is a vehicle for the expression of godly reality. Because it doesn't have to be into, milkshakes. Naturally, it'll be into milkshakes. It doesn't have to do any work to be into milkshakes. The natural state of the Nefesh HaBahamis, of the animal soul, is that it'll like milkshakes. Vanilla, chocolate, strawberry, pick your flavor, but it'll like milkshakes. Right? Might get a stomachache for milkshakes, but it'll like milkshakes. Right? Okay. Why? Well, that's just the way it is. Probably likes the taste of chocolate. Doesn't take a lot of avodah to like the taste of chocolate. You don't have to sit and explain to your child at great length about the properties of chocolate and how wonderful chocolate is, and it's really good, and it's a chocolate pudding. It's like soft and nice and has a nice texture, and it's a nice temperature. And all you have to do is give the kid one spoonful of chocolate pudding. The first spoonful of chocolate pudding, the kid will be a chocolate freak the rest of his life. He'll start drooling all over himself from the chocolate. There's no avodah in liking chocolate. There might be avodah in eating it in a proper way, like using chocolate properly in your diet, as opposed to just eating 5 puddings a day and 6 milk chocolate bars. Not a very good use of chocolate. You want to have a couple of pieces of dark chocolate every day. Excellent for your cholesterol. Doctors recommend it. Not when you're 25. Whatever you do then is basically irrelevant, other than smoking cigarettes. Right? Okay. But, once you get older and more decrepit, so they tell you about all these things that are good for you. They also say dry red wine. So you can basically eat chocolate and drink dry red wine and say your doctor told you to. If you don't like dry red wine, you miss out on one of the good ones. Right? If you do like it, so then you're in luck. Right? If you don't like chocolate, well, there's something wrong with you. Right? So what can you do? Actually, the dark chocolate is on a certain level an acquired taste. My kids don't like it. It's too bitter. Okay. So the nature of the Nefesh HaBahamis is it's just into Gashmis. But can the Nefesh HaBahamis be educated and illuminated? Well, your Nefesh HaBahamis decided to come sit in Chassidus class this morning, because nothing you do can be done without the involvement of your Nefesh HaBahamis. If your Nefesh HaBahamis doesn't decide to do it, then it doesn't happen, because your Nefesh HaBahamis is the source of conscious you. That experience you have of that person you refer to as I, and we call you by a name, right? That person, that experience, what is that experience? That's an experience of your Nefesh HaBahamis. Is it a bad experience? Not a bad experience. It's a wonderful experience. It's an amazing thing. We thank God for it every single day, all the time. Can it be used for bad things? Unbelievable what it can get into, like beyond belief. Okay. Can it be used for good things? Unbelievable. Incredibly good things can come as a result of a Nefesh HaBahamis. It's all matter what we use it for. So how do I get it to be connected? How do I get conscious me to be connected to something positive, as opposed to what it will naturally be connected to, which is, physical pleasure, emotional pleasure, even spiritual pleasure. I might find that nice. Right? I heard about spirituality. Oh, that's nice. Makes me feel good. What's that got to do with God? Absolutely nothing. It's just all about me feeling good. I like that feeling. Okay. Is that better than, robbing banks? Yes, of course it's better than robbing banks, right? Oh, robbing banks makes me feel good. Don't rob banks, right? Giving tzedakah makes me feel good. Fantastic. Give tzedakah. But hopefully you're not giving tzedakah simply because it makes you feel good. Hopefully you're giving tzedakah because you care about the person you're giving tzedakah to. You care about their welfare and you want them to have something that they need. Right? You can feel nice about that. There's a nice Seder, but hopefully that's not the reason I'm doing it. If that's the reason I'm doing it, then I'll probably try to multiply poor people. Make sure there's a lot of poor people, because then I can feel even better by giving them money. Makes me feel so good to go to Guatemala and rebuild houses for the people whose houses were destroyed by the hurricane. Why did you go? Oh, it makes me feel so good to go and help. I hope there's a hurricane next year so I can go help again, because it makes me feel so good. Isn't that what all the people who they interview, when they ask them, why did you volunteer? You're such a good person. Why did you volunteer to go to Guatemala? And they all say the end of the first parak in Tanya. It makes me feel so good. That's what they all say, all of them, right? They only interview rich and famous people. I don't know what the normal everyday people say. I'm not sure, right? But the rich and famous people all say exactly the same thing. Makes me feel so good to help them. Oh, I hope they have another disaster so I can feel good next year too. But of course, I only go on my holiday. I can't go in the middle of life. So it was very convenient that the hurricane happened, when I was off. I wasn't in the middle of filming a movie or something. Okay. Does it mean it's bad to go help those people? It's a wonderful thing to do. Kol hakavod, well done. But let's not turn it into some godly act, because it wasn't. It was all just about me feeling good, which is a great thing to feel good about. Fantastic. That's much better than feeling good about drinking liquor. But, it's still coming from a place in Nefesh HaBahamis that hasn't been completely elevated, because the Nefesh HaBahamis of you can get to a point where it's not necessarily interested in this feeling good. I do this because it's good for me. You can get to a point where you do it because it's good, neto, and leave the me out of it. Is that hard? Okay, it's hard. Can you get there? Yes. Your Nefesh HaBahamis can be in such a place. Right? Tanya. Right? Tanya's the first 5 chapters of Tanya will explain that to you very, very clearly. Right? Is it a challenge? It's a challenge. I mean, what else have we got to do down here? And that's why we're here, that challenge. So that's the fire from above, the fiery, burning passion of the Nefesh Elokis. Now that's the midas of the Nefesh Elokis, the emotional attributes of the Nefesh Elokis. The intellect of the Nefesh Elokis tends to be rather cool, calm, and collected, as the nature of intellect, as is the nature of intellect. Okay. Ubekol zeis, even though there's all these things happening in Elam Hazeh that might confuse and confound me, and the single most difficult thing to figure out how to do in Elam Hazeh is how to make a living. And the reason that is generally explained to us who stay here by those who leave here, and it might even be they're leaving earlier than they would like to, is because they have to figure out how to make a living. Almost always, that's their answer. Right? Now, sometimes they're doing amazing things to go make a living. Sometimes they're just, they're scared. They're afraid that they won't be able to make a living, so they have to go do something else other than sit and learn Torah, because they have to go figure out how to make a living. Do they have any financial obligations right now that are so serious that they have to right now go and take care of them? No. They don't have a wife, they don't have children, they don't have a mortgage, they don't have a car. They might have a car, but their father paid for it. They don't have any of those issues. But what are they worried about? Making a living. Welcome to Elam Hazeh. Can they overcome that? Yeah. Once they realize where their living comes from, so then they realize that the same person who's Torah, same being whose Torah they're enjoying learning, that's the same being that takes care of their parnasa. Mm-hmm. Now, there's all sorts of good things to do out there in the world.
Good question. Why is making a living considered harder than connecting to your soul, like studying Torah with all of the world's distractions? Wouldn't that be harder than making a living, which is...
What are the distractions? What are the world's distractions you just described? Making a living.
So then
and eating chocolate pudding.
But then making a living is like,
That's the single biggest distraction in most people's lives relative to them accomplishing what they'd really be interested in accomplishing. Some people, the only thing they're interested in accomplishing is making money. Fine, so then it's not getting in the way. But those people are dumb. Okay? So people who actually have an idea that they would like to accomplish something of worth in this world, other than just accumulate wealth, those people find, rightfully so, that the thing that gets in the way more than anything else is the need to make a living. Just the way it is. So now what if those people have decided they want to have a serious relationship with God? What's going to get in the way more than anything else? Making a living. What's going to stop them from learning Torah more than anything else? Well, they're going to spend 11 or 12 hours a day involved in making a living by the time they get up in the morning and get to work and get back from work and eat lunch at work. It's going to take, it's 8 hours of work if they're lucky, right? And then there's a few hours, there's some time before and some time after, and then there's also just sort of, you get home and it's not like you get home and you can just, open the book. Okay. Have to sort of, to get myself together a little bit. Okay. Now there's also things happening at home that are very, very important, and they might be part of your relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. They're called your wife and your children. Okay. That's also part of Elam Hazeh. That might get in your way of your own personal relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, even though that's a very, very important part of your relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, your wife and your children. But there's also part of Elam Hazeh. And they're going to get in the way of your learning Torah. I don't mean that in a bad way. They're supposed to get in the way, right? But they are going to get in the way, right? Mm-hmm. You would like to sit down and learn a Gemara, Rashi, Tosfos, and some Rishonim, and you're going to sit down with your son and learn something very basic because that's what he needs to do for his homework. Well, good for you. That's an important thing to do. But in your heart of hearts, what would you rather be doing? Just open up a page of Gemara and sit down and learn Gemara like you know how to. Why? Because you spent a couple of years in yeshiva and figured out how to do it. And so now it's just one of the most enjoyable and amazing parts of your life. But you can't do that very often. Why not? Well, there's all these other things that just have to happen in Elam Hazeh. It's just the way Elam Hazeh is. Now, sitting and learning with your kid is amazing. But it's still something that's not, if I had my way, perhaps I'd, if my Nefesh Elokis had its way, it would just be sitting and learning all day. Right? But you can't do that in Elam Hazeh. It's not the way the world works. There's all these responsibilities. Financial, emotional, things we have to do.
Isn't that the reason we're here, though?
Absolutely, 100%. 100%. But that means you also have to deal with it. And the one that is most difficult to deal with, and the one that most people fail at, is making a living.
That's what we're here to do.
I get you're right, 100%. I agree with you. You want to say that again? And I'll say what I have back to say. I'll say it again. Right? 100%. And what's the single most difficult thing to do in Elam Hazeh successfully? Figure out how to make a living and still be an El Chayid. Right? 100%. Very hard. Is that what we're here for? Yes. Is it hard? Sure is. Do most people fail? I don't know. We're not giving grades. Do most people find that a difficult thing to do? Yes. Yeah. Because what do they lose sight of? The fact that their parnasa comes from God and not from their college degree or from the factory they own. The factory they own is the kli that the Eibusher gave them to give them the bracha that God gives them. Mm-hmm. That's why the Tzemach Tzedek said people in business have greater fear of God than people who sit and learn all day. People sit and learn all day, so what does it say? Everything's in the hands of Shemayim except the fear of heaven. Right? In other words, that how well you're going to do with learning, God helps, but bottom line, the more you put in, the more you get out. That's the equation. You work harder, you'll figure it out faster. You just sort of sit there and hope that it's going to come. It will, it won't, probably not. Right? Completely and totally quid pro quo. How much you put in, you get out. In Avodah Hashem. In business, it doesn't work that way. Whatever the Eibusher decides. For some reason, the Eibusher decided that the idea that Jeff Bezos happened to have is going to turn into a better business idea than the idea that some other guy had, who lives very nicely, but doesn't have $2,700 billion. Why? The Eibusher decided that guy's going to have what he has, and this guy's going to have what he has. And if he thinks that he's better than anybody else, well, he's just out to lunch. Right? And what will probably happen within 3 generations? Will his kids have it? No. Why? Because they'll grow up with a silver spoon in their mouth and won't think they have to work as hard as their father worked to get it. So the first generation will probably work pretty hard because they saw their father work pretty hard. And the statistics are that by the 3rd or 4th generation, most of the family wealth is gone. Where are the Rockefellers? Who are the Rockefellers? Does anybody know? Have you guys ever heard of the Rockefellers? You've heard of them. Rockefeller Center in New York, right. There are 3 people in this room that when they were growing up, when you said a rich person, you said as rich as the Rockefellers. That was a synonym for rich, Rockefeller. Before that, what was it? Rothschilds. That was a while back, the Rothschilds. For Jews, the richest Jews were the Rothschilds. Where are the Rothschilds? There's still probably a few around with a few bucks,
One
but...
of the last family just passed away.
Oh, yeah?
About 2 months ago.
Oh, okay. So they probably had a few dollars left over. It's not, but they, you know, they you didn't have to give them challahs. You didn't have to give them challahs for Shabbos, but they weren't the richest Jews in the world. Why? Because what happens is the kids don't work very hard because they figure you don't have to because it's just all there. So now, I don't know, it might take a long time for Jeff Bezos' billions to run out. I don't know how that works. I have no idea. But, you know, Bill Gates, to his credit, what did he say to his kids? I'm not giving you so much that you don't have to work. You're going to have to work because otherwise you'll just be, you know, sort of unsuccessful human beings. I'm not interested in you being unsuccessful human beings, so I'm going to give it all away to charity. I'm going to leave you some. You're not going to be poor. You're going to have more money than any of us will ever have. Fine, but he didn't leave them ridiculous amounts of money. They're going to have to go to work. Well done. Good job. Right? Smart. Right? What they'll do? Who knows what they'll do? Probably working computers, huh? Is that what everybody does? That's my Rabbi. Trying to make a living in Elam Hazeh. Very, very, very troubling. Right? And it's interesting, the Rebbeim, all the way back, not just in the 21st century, in the 20th and in the 19th and in the 18th century of the Common Era, the Rebbeim talked about Mayim Rabbim exactly the same way, making a living. Because it's not something new. It's something that's been in the way of what people really want to do in their lives for a long time. And we have to figure out how to navigate all that and balance that and do it in a healthy way, in a proper way. It's not easy. It's not easy. Right? Some people get very, very fortunate, get to do things that they love doing in order to make a living and things that actually have meaning and matter. Right? I'm going to make Nate feel good now. When my wife and I were so-called dating, whatever you do, you know, whatever it's called, we were shidduchim, whatever we were doing. So, you know, you have conversations about life. So she was a medical student. I asked her, why'd she want to be a medical student? So she said, well, I was trying to think of things that a person could do that every day when you get up and go to work, you're doing something of value for other people. So the things I thought of most were teaching and medicine. She said I'd be a crummy teacher, so I decided to become a doctor. That's what she said to me. I found that impressive. I married her. Right?
She's still in the business?
She's still a doctor? Yeah. She's a doctor. Takes care of us all. She's happy she's a doctor. She always says to me as she hangs up the phone, Baruch Hashem, I'm a doctor, because it's the only reason the kids ever call when this one has a, you know, this, and this one has a this, and this one has a this. They call her up. We have our in-house doctor, all of us. Yeah.
In a lot of observant families, I noticed that the woman is the one who supports the house financially, so that the man could commit more to Torah. Does that affect the giving-receiving relationship, that men need to be the givers but women the receivers? But it's sometimes the woman tends to be the one who supports the household.
That's only in a relatively limited part of the Jewish world. There's a certain part of the Jewish world where that's basically the way it works, but not in in the Orthodox world at large, that's not the way it works. Most men make a living, especially in America.
You know, usually they do make a living, but like the woman tends to make way more because I don't know.
That's not true. That's true in a particular section of the religious community, but that's not a generality relative to the religious community at large. Happens to be my wife makes more than me because she's a doctor and I'm a teacher in yeshiva, but we both work, right? That's not. That's something that is the way it works. It works that way here in Eretz Yisrael more than in Chutz La'aretz, and the reason it works here in Eretz Yisrael has a lot to do with the army as opposed to anything else. Meaning, if there weren't a problem with the army, a lot of people who were sitting and learning all day would go get a job. I hate to be cynical, but that's not cynical. It's just true.
I don't even think it's true anymore.
Why?
Because oftentimes women will have a job that can easily make more than that.
Yeah, oh no, 100%, but not because the guy's sitting and learning all day, just because they're both making a living.
Even if he's working.
Right.
There were times when my wife made more than I did, and
Right.
I made more than she did.
Right.
It goes back and forth.
Yep. No, there's all, but I mean, you were generally talking about so he could sit and learn. You said that, so he can sit and learn. That's a relatively small part of the religious Jewish community where that happens more than for a year, 2 or 3 at the beginning of the marriage.
Maybe not learn all day. Maybe what I meant to say was like to designate some time of their day to learning. But with this time that they commit to learning, they don't commit to working.
Well, mothers commit more time to taking care of the family, taking care of the children, than husbands generally commit to learning. If you and I learned as much as our wives spend time taking care of the children, we'd be in pretty good shape.
I have a friend who works at B&H camera in New York.
Right.
He works all day and he learns. I think his wife probably makes more than he does, but she has come up with a business that makes more than he does.
Right.
Okay, well, could he make more working? Sure, he can make more money than overtime. He chooses to spend 24 hours in the call.
Baruch Hashem. What, he works in B&H?
He works at B&H and
Right.
they make it easy for him.
Right. Okay. There's definitely, the man has all sorts of obligations that might get in the way of working. The woman also has more obligations that will get in the way of working. But it does the finances are not the be all and end all of what it means to be a giver and a taker. To be, to answer the question in the end. I took issue with the basis of the question. But the question also, even if the basis of the question is true, no, finances isn't what about being a giver and a taker is all about, because we don't define everything in financial terms. Just don't. Right? The man being the mashpia is a function of his relationship with his wife and his children in a certain way, and the woman being the mikabelis is a function of her relationship with her husband and the children in a certain way, though the woman is to a great degree the greater influencer in the house. The Rebbe says all the time. Why is a woman called an akeres habayis? So akeres habayis, if you were to look it up in a dictionary, it'll say a housewife. Okay, fine. But the Rebbe explains what's akeres habayis. She's the ikar of the house. What's ikar? Essence. Who sets the tone in the house? The woman. She's the mashpia in the house. Not the mashpia in a relationship with her husband, no. But who sets the tone in the house? Woman. She's there. It's her house. Husband lives there. She runs it. It's her house. It's the way it's supposed to be. It's her house. Therefore, the what's going on in that house depends a lot on her. If she's a person who's very, very powerfully connected to a Kadosh Baruch Hu, that will resonate in the walls and in the curtains and in the sofas and in the rugs. All right? There might be nice curtains and nice sofas, but it's absolutely clear when you walk into that house that what's more important than whether the curtains match the carpet is the godly feeling of family and home that you get when you walk into that house. Where does that come from? Her. That's her. He has something to do with it. He's not completely useless, but it's her. Right? And hopefully, when we walk into a house, we don't notice the drapes and the sofa. That doesn't mean it shouldn't be a nice drapes and nice sofa. But that's not what you notice. What do you notice? the home of it. And I think that's what most people do feel when they walk into someone's house as a Shabbos guest. They feel the home of it and the family of it more than the physical trappings of it. The physical trappings should be very nice, especially Shabbos. Right? Nice dishes on the table and nice food and all that. Okay, but that's not what makes it special. Because I could get that in a restaurant. And people do sometimes have to eat Shabbos meal in a restaurant. If you're in a hotel, you eat Shabbos meal in a restaurant. It's the same? Yeah. It's not the same. Pesach, in a room full of other people making Seder. I can never understand. Okay, I understand that, you don't have to do the cleaning. That I get. Okay, we have to go a few more lines further in this, then we're going to stop. Even though there's all this craziness of Eilam Hazeh, the rivers won't wash it away. The stream of consciousness. Why? So now the Rebbe is going to tell us how to do it. We're going to read the next 3-4 lines, and then we're going to stop. But the Rebbe has to tell us how to do it, or else we're going to be confused. The feet, the Rishvei Eisha Ava, the burning, fiery love of the Nefesh Elokis, the Nefesh Elokis, and the godly soul, who? The Dugmas Eish Shalamayla. It's like the fire from above. And what do we know about that fire from above? The Eina Mayim Chabin, I say. The water doesn't douse it. What's the water? The Mayim Rabim of this world. All the turbulence of this world. And that's why it's translated the turbulent waters. A person can drown in Eilam Hazeh. Now the next 3-4 lines, the Rebbe tells us what Avodah is really all about. It's amazing. And in this, it is the requirement of the sacrifice of the Nefesh Abamis. What does that mean? Shegam hu, also he, the Nefesh Abamis, yeh lo yavel elokus, that he will love God. Meaning conscious you will love God. You'll be able to say, I love God. I, meaning my Nefesh Abamis, loves God. How can my Nefesh Abamis love God? Well, you say it every day, 3 times at least. U'kamesha kosuv, really 4 times. Right? Second verse in Kriya Shema. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. V'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha. The Baruch Shem is not part of the pasuk. It's part of davening. It's not part of the pasuk. The next pasuk in that part in Devarim is you should love God with all your heart and all your soul and all your ma'od. Okay. So what's all your heart? So now the word heart should of course be spelled lamed base. B'chol libcha, with all your heart. Why is it spelled levavcha with 2 bases? So Rashi quotes this on Chumash. It's a Medrash Chazal. Va'amar Razal, b'shnei yitzrecha, with both of your inclinations, both of your laves, both of your hearts, even your. Now in Chassidus we wouldn't say Yetzer Tov, Yetzer Hara. In Chassidus we'd say Nefesh Elokis and Nefesh Abamis. That your godly soul and your animal soul. Again, what's your animal soul? Conscious you. Every conscious activity that you do because you're Nefesh Bahamis. That conscious person that runs your life wants it done. There's a few things we do that are called reflexes. Everything else is a conscious act. Right? If you move your hand away from the fire, that's not a function of some conscious decision. That's just a reflex to move it away. The doctor hits that little place on your knee and your leg goes. Okay. But everything else we do because we made a conscious decision to do it. Who made the conscious decision to do it? My Nefesh Bahamis made the conscious decision because my Nefesh Bahamis is the source of conscious me. That person who lives in Eilam Hazeh and is aware of himself as a create, hopefully aware of himself as a created being. But that created being is aware of the fact that God created me, meaning he's over there, so to speak, and I'm over here. That experience, where does it come from? Nefesh Abamis, animal soul. Can that person make a decision that's godly and positive? Of course. That person makes a decision. All the people in this room who have a Nefesh Abamis are going to put on tefillin in a few minutes. Going to make an unbelievable decision to do something so incredibly powerfully connected to God. Where's the ultimate desire for that coming from? My Nefesh Elokis, my godly soul. But my godly soul can't do anything in this world if it doesn't get the cooperation of the Nefesh Abamis. Nefesh Bahamis has to be there because it's going to be a conscious activity. And I'm going to be aware of the fact that I'm putting on tefillin. I hope I'm aware of the fact that I'm putting on tefillin. Should be aware of the fact that I'm putting on tefillin. Got up in the morning. Why did I get up in the morning? I want to learn Chassidus. Why? My Nefesh Bahamis likes learning Chassidus. How did I get my Nefesh Bahamis to like learning Chassidus? How'd that happen? My Nefesh Bahamis likes milkshakes. I thought that's what my Nefesh Bahamis likes. No, we can educate the Nefesh Bahamis to like Elokus. So that's what the Rebbe's going to explain now, and then we'll stop. The Amr Zal b'shnei yitzrecha. The Gama Nefesh Bahamis, also the animal soul, Yeloi Aval Elokus, will have love for God. The Zeba, how does this happen? Al Yedei Hislavshus HaNefesh Elokis b'Nefesh Bahamis. The clothing of the Nefesh Elokis in the Nefesh Bahamis. Meaning, the Rebbe is going to explain, contemplating ideas of godliness that human intellect can understand. It's called learning Chassidus. You could say, I'm just going to read Zohar. Zohar is very holy, and it is. And I'm going to read Zohar because Zohar is holy, and so I'm going to use my intellect to read Zohar. So that's a beautiful thing to do, except one problem. I might not understand it very much. And since I don't understand it very much, it's not going to make a great impression on my conscious reality. That doesn't mean there's not a positive thing to do, but that's a perfect example of something we call makif. Something that has some sort of residual effect, but actually affecting my conscious reality. I don't understand the words I'm learning, so how can it affect my conscious reality? Does it have some sort of positive effect on me as a whole? Yes, no question. Does it affect the way I think? I don't know what to think about if I don't understand the words. If I do understand the words, of course it'll help me think. So what's that? The Hislavs Nefesh Elokis b'Nefesh Bahamis. The Tchila at first, Tarib Nefesh Bahamis ein lo shum yediyah v'hergish binyan elokus klal. Sorry, I read that too fast. The Tchila Hare, a Nefesh Bahamis, ein lo, does not have shum yediyah, any understanding v'hergish or sensitivity binyan elokus klal in godly matters at all. Amnam, however. Now the Rebbe is going to explain it, and then we're stopping. Al yedei hislavshus nefesh elokis, by the clothing of the godly soul in the animal soul, which is like that fire from above that came down to burn the korban on the mizbeach, on the altar, in the first base of Mikdash. And what does that mean? Umizbeinen bizbeinenus eloki, that he contemplates godly matters, godly ideas, in a way that what? The Gama Nefesh Bahamis Yuchol Asigre. That also the Nefesh Bahamis can understand. I thought the Nefesh Bahamis is an idiot. It's not an idiot. Nefesh Bahamis can be unbelievably sophisticated. Human intellect? Phew. It's amazing what human intellect can do. Okay, so what if I get that human intellect to actually use its powers to appreciate godliness? So it can think about and talk about God for hours because it's studied him at great length. The way some people can talk about cars and other people can talk about curveballs. But this person can talk about God. Why? Well, because he's educated his Nefesh Bahamis to appreciate godliness and to know a lot about godliness. So then godliness can become very, very much part of his conscious reality. If he spends his whole day reading books about car mechanics, so I assume he's probably going to be thinking about car mechanics a lot. Reasonable, that's what he puts in his head, so that's what his head's going to think about. If he spends a great deal of time learning about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then he's probably going to be able to think about HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a fairly sophisticated way and keep himself busy wondering about things like that. I don't think we could have a very long discussion right now about 18th century French art, because I don't think anybody has any idea whatsoever about 18th century French art in his head right now, here, today. I don't imagine anybody else here does, so it'll be a pretty short conversation. Can we even mention one artist? Maybe, yes, maybe we'll get lucky, we'll say one. Monet, maybe he was, maybe he wasn't, I don't know, but I've heard of him and it sounds like he's French. If it's E-T at the end and you pronounce it Monet, he's probably French. Okay, maybe he was 18th century. I don't know. Maybe he was 20th century. I don't know. But I know there was a guy named Monet. Picasso was Spanish, so don't go there. Okay. So there's not much to say. So there are lots of people who walk around Eilam Hazeh, and this is the nature of the Nefesh Bahamis. who have nothing to say about God. Why? Well, why should I have anything to say about him? Never learned about him, thought about him. Right? The only thing they'll say with great certainty, he doesn't exist. Oh, good. Okay, good. Good. Well done. Right? And Torah's outdated. Right. Good. Let me open a Gemara and see if you can find Rashi and Tosfos on the page. Can't find Rashi, can't find Tosfos, doesn't know what the Gemara is, never heard of it, but he has an opinion as to whether or not the Torah is true. He does have an opinion. Like I have an opinion on the newest theories in nuclear physics. I don't have an opinion on the newest theories. I don't know anything about the newest theories in nuclear physics, so of course I don't have an opinion. How can I have an opinion about Torah if I can't find a Rashi on a page of Gemara? Don't even know where he is. So I have an opinion about Torah? Completely and totally ignorant of Torah. So that's all. That's not all right, but I mean that is not the person's fault. But don't have an opinion on it. Just say I don't know anything about it, for good or for bad. Yeah.
Doesn't that require the assumption that like we should, without understanding our connection to Hashem, that we should have some like basis of believing in that we study and then we like realize actually like I'm thinking of my family who doesn't connect in the same way that I do, and for me to tell them that idea that like, oh, you don't understand because you don't even know, like you haven't even tried to understand, but that would require them to like have some basis of belief to even approach it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay. I mean, yes, they do have a basis of belief because every single Jew is a believer, the son of a believer, because they have a nefesh elokis that we're
Sure,
talking
but
about.
it's so concealed.
But exactly, meaning it hasn't penetrated into their conscious reality, so it can be completely and totally concealed and dormant, 100%. So how do you trigger that? You trigger that by throwing out little words of Torah now and then, interesting ideas. Oh, I learned something really interesting today. Not something obligatory. Because as soon as you talk about ritual, they'll get nervous at first. Just an idea about reality that they might find interesting. Oh. And why will they find it interesting? Well, they'll find it interesting because it's probably interesting. So that's their nefesh habahamis finding it interesting. And they'll also find it interesting because behind that nefesh habahamis is a nefesh elokis. Right? I mean, what you're saying is, we talked about this last week in a slightly different context. What's us religious Jewish types? What's our problem? Our problem is we can't get anybody in the door. Once we get them in the door, how many people don't like it? Very few. Some don't, but very few. Most go, wow, this is amazing. Why? Well, first of all, it's in line with who they are. It's just them. Okay. But it's also amazing. Meaning the nefesh habahamis also just go, wow, this is like an amazing idea. Okay. If a person finds ideas in any way, shape, or form interesting. So they tend to gravitate to it. Why? Well, the deeper part is what the Rebbe is saying about the nefesh elokis. That's who we are. But it also will resonate in the nefesh habahamis. How do we get them in the door? $1 million question. Keeping them isn't as hard. Not keeping them for 10 years, I'm saying. Just, keeping them interested in it and having them say, well, that was something positive and amazing and different, and I'm glad I did that. Very few people walk out of here or anywhere else saying they're unhappy they did that. Okay. But then what? So then, at a certain point, they're going to have to make certain decisions regarding obligation. Then it starts getting a little sticky. Because I like it, but I don't know whether I want to obligate myself to something that tells me what to do. I don't like being told what to do. Get over that. I mean, we do. Most of us get over that at some point. It's okay. I don't have any problem having the Shulchan Aruch tell me what to do. I don't even know him. Well, yes, you do. He's as much part of your life as your grandfather. Right? You never met him. It doesn't matter. You're quoting him all the time. But it takes a while for him to become part of your life. Right? So how do you do that? So that's what the Rebbe said. How do you change your nefesh habahamis? Educate it. Sit it down at Farbrengens. Sit it down in front of Jewish books. Sit it down in front of people you can have conversations with who might have things to say about life that you haven't thought about. And that changes the way I look at things. That changes the way my conscious reality works. There's no question. Complete and total change? Well, it's not a lobotomy. But does it illuminate things? Yes, it illuminates things. That's what the Rebbe's talking about. It's late.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.